This lesson is going to cover writing equations of the ellipses. So this is chapter 10, lesson 2, and it's day 2. So we're going to be given some information, and in this problem we're given the center point, the focus points, because notice it's plus and minus 3, and then the major axis length. So again, just like we did with the parabolas, we should be drawing and giving ourselves a visual. So I'm going to go ahead and graph what they've given me. Notice this center point is at 0, 0. So I'm going to graph the center right here. And then I'm going to graph the two focus points. Now, notice my focus points, I could break this apart and say it's 0, minus 3, 0, plus 3. So what I'm going to do is graph those two. So I'll put one here and one here. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our other piece of given information. And they're telling us that the major axis length is 8. So that's going to be the length of the entire axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide it by 2. And this is going to give me my A value. Because remember, the major axis, that's going to be for our A and our A squared. So A squared, if I square the 4, my A squared is 16. Now also remember that your focus points are always on the major axis. So right here I can see that my focus point has a number in the Y spot. So this tells me that my Y axis is going to be my major axis. So my graph is going to be vertical. So I've already got my focus points, and notice they're both, my C value is going to be the distance that the focus point is away from the center, and I can see that my C value here is 3, and then I'm going to need that C value in order to find my B value, or my B squared. So if C equals 3, then C squared equals 9. Now, in order to find the B, I'm going to be doing C squared equals A squared minus B squared. So I can plug in my 9. I'm going to plug in my 16 and then leave the B squared. And now I'm going to solve. I'm going to subtract 16. I get negative 7 equals negative B squared. Divide by negative 1. And B squared equals 7. Now at this point, I'm not going to square root it. Now, one other thing that we should think about is the standard form of the equation we're looking for. So remember, when your center is at 0, 0, we had two scenarios. We either had the A squared that was under the X squared, and then B squared would have been here, or we have this set up, and this is the one that we have for this problem. Because remember, we've determined that our major axis is Y, so this is what I'm filling in. So I got the A from, or my A squared, from taking this number, dividing it by 2 and squaring it. And then I found the B squared by using this formula. So now that I found A squared and B squared, that's all I'm filling in now. So X squared over 7, because that's my B squared, and then Y squared over 16, and it equals 1. And I'm done. Now, if it said to take this information and also create a graph, I could have also added in my vertices and my co-vertices. But let's go ahead and just keep practicing writing the equations. What I'll do is, on the last example that I do, I'll complete the whole thing. So let's try another example. Notice again, the center is at 0, 0. So we need to figure out, are we using this one with the A squared under the X squared, and then the B squared under the Y squared, Or are we using this one? Remember, the x squared and the y squared always stay in the same spots. What moves is your a squared, b squared. All right, so again, let's give ourselves a visual. I'm going to graph my center point. I'm also going to graph my focus points. So my focus points are at positive 2, 0, and negative 2, 0. They also gave me my vertices. Now, again, remember, your vertices and your focus points, they're always on the major axis. So if you notice on both of these, the number is in the x spot. So this tells me that my major axis is going to be the x. It's going to be horizontal. So let's go ahead and graph these focus points, because I'm going to need to figure out my c value in order to find b squared. So I can put the focus points on. Those are at 2 and negative 2. And then I could just put my vertices on here. They're going to be at 3 and negative 3. Those are the vertices. These were the focus points. So we can see that the focus points are 2 spaces away. So my c value is 2. So c squared is 2 squared, which is 4. So now I need to use the c squared equals a squared minus b squared. I'm going to plug in 4 for c squared. I'm going to plug in 9 because remember, the vertices use the a. So if your a value is 3, then a squared is 9. So then I'm going to do 9 squared minus b squared, and then I'm going to solve. Actually, not 9 squared. It was 3 squared. And then that became a 9. So let me go ahead and change that to a 9. So now I need to subtract 9. Negative 5 equals negative b squared. Divide by negative 1. And b squared equals 5. Again, I'm not square rooting it because remember, all we're filling in is a squared and b squared. I got the a squared from my vertice, because remember, we would always take that center point and add and subtract a. So my a value is 3. When I squared it, it's 9. So let's fill all this in. So it becomes x squared over a squared, which is 9, plus y squared, and then I just found the b squared to be 5, equals 1. And I'm done. Let's try another one. This time, again, they're giving me a vertice, 2 vertices. Actually, you'll break them apart, 0, 5, 0, negative 5. And this time, they're giving me an order pair. So again, remember, this order pair is x, y, because I need to be able to find a squared and b squared here. So again, let's get a visual. And I'm going to go ahead and graph these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have a vertice here and here. And then they're also telling me I have this order pair 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2. So come over here. So this order pair, so I can already see that my ellipsis is taking on this shape. So now what I need to do is use the rest of my given. I can already see that my a equals 5. So a squared equals 25. Also, this is telling me that my major axis is the y-axis. So it's vertical. So now what I need to do is I'm using x squared over b squared equals y squared over a squared equals 1. I can plug in my a squared, and then what I'm going to do is plug in these two numbers and square them for x squared and y squared. So x is 4, I'm going to square it. Y is 2, I'm going to square it. And then I don't know b squared, this is what I'm working towards. And then my a squared is 25. So let me go ahead and square these. I get 16 over b squared, 4 over 25. I'm going to need to change my whole number 1 because I'm going to be subtracting 4/25. So let me just put the 1 there for now. So what I need to do is move the 4/25 to the other side. So I'm going to change the whole number 1 and I'm going to make it 25 over 25. So now I get 16 over b squared, and then 25 minus 4 is 21. And now I need to solve this. Now, the way that I'm going to solve this is I'm just going to solve it like a proportion. Now, you could also multiply both sides by b squared and then divide by 21, but I'm going to treat it as a proportion. So I'm going to multiply b squared times 21 and 16 times 25. It doesn't matter how you do it. You can do it either way. So 21, let's do this in a darker color, 21b squared, and then 16 times 25 is 400. Divide both sides by 21, and b squared is equal to 400 over 21. Now remember, this is the equation I'm trying to fill in. All I'm looking to fill in is my a squared and my b squared. So let's go ahead and fill those in. So now I'm going to take x squared, and I'm going to put b squared, which is 400 over 21. And then I have my y squared, and I'll put the a squared underneath, and it equals 1. Now, I need to fix the red one. I can't leave this fraction in the fraction. So what I need to do, and I'm just going to show you a shortcut way to do it, is you just need to bring the 21 to the numerator, but let me show you the math behind it. So what we're doing here is x squared divided by, this fraction bar means division, 400 over 21. So I'm going to do a keep flip change, and I end up with 21x squared over 400. And that's what I'm going to replace this with. So really all I need to do is take this 21 and move it to the top. But the final answer here is going to be 21x squared over 400 plus y squared over 25 equals 1. And that's your final equation. So that's the tricky part here. All right, let's try one where our center point is not at the origin. So let's go ahead and again, let's get a visual. Now, whenever they give you the axis length, we always take this number and divide it by 2. Notice this time it was minor. Remember the minor axis, that's our b. So b equals 1. If I square both sides, it still stays 1. So b squared equals 1. So let me go ahead and graph the rest of this. So it tells me I have a vertice at +3, +3, and I also have one at 3, -3. So 3, 3, and 3, -3. These are vertices. Now, remember, your center is going to be the midpoint, or it's in the middle of the two vertices. So we have two options here. We can either use the midpoint formula, where we would add the x's, divide by 2, add the y's, divide by 2 to get the coordinates of the midpoint, or you could just count. Notice there's 3 spaces right here and 3 spaces right here. So you can see that your center point is going to be right here, and your center point is going to be 3, 0. Now, if you'd rather do the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And this will give you the x of your midpoint and the y of your midpoint. This would be x1, y1, x2, y2. So either way, you could do the midpoint formula, or you could just count. If it's a vertical or a horizontal line, you could just count the spaces and find the middle. Now again, remember this center point, 3, 0, this is our HK. So for this one, we're going to be using the 2 formulas. We're going to either be doing x minus h squared, and it'll either be over the a squared or the y. So this would be one scenario. And then the other one is this. And then put the a squared under the y squared. Now we can already see that because the 2 vertices are on top of each other like this, they're vertical up and down, I know I'm going to be using this equation. So what we're going to do here, now that we've found our center point, we also have our b squared. Now we need to find a squared. Now, this time I don't know anything about the focus. I really don't need to do the formula c squared equals a squared minus b squared, because I just need to find my a value. And my a value is going to be the number of spaces that the vertice is from the center. So we already determined when I did this yellow right here that it was 3 spaces away. So that's my a value. So a equals 3, so a squared equals 9. So now all I have to do is plug in my center for h and k, my a squared value, and my b squared value. So x minus 3 squared over the b squared, which is 1, and then y minus k, which is 0, squared over 9 equals 1. Now, anytime you have a 0 that's part of your center, notice this right here, y minus 0, this is just going to become a y squared. And this I'm going to leave. So anytime you have a 0 in the order pair for the center, it's whatever it is. If the 0 is in the y, then you could just write it as a y squared. If it's easier for you to actually plug in the h and the k and then simplify it, you can also do that. So this time we did not need to find the c value, because again, your goal is to only find a squared and b squared and the center point if it's not 0, 0, and plug those 4 things in. Let's try another example. I'm sorry, I skipped one. Let me go back and do number 5 first. Major axis still, same idea here. Divide by 2, and I get 4. Again, because it's major, this is a. So a squared, if I square a and square 4, my a squared is 16. Again, let's get a visual. I'm going to graph the 2 focus points. I have one here at 0, 0. And then I have another one here at 1, 2, 3, 4 at 4, 0. Now, again, remember, the focus is always on your major axis. So this tells me if I look at this, I can already see that where there is a number in the order pair, it's in the x spot. So this tells me my major axis is the x-axis, so it's horizontal. So now what I can do is, remember, we're going to find the center point. The center is always going to be equidistant from these focus points. So either I could do the midpoint, or again, because it's a horizontal line, I can see that there's 2 spaces here and 2 spaces on this side. So my center point is going to be this ordered pair 2, 0. Now, these 2 spaces that I counted in between the center and the focus, that's my C value. So then C squared equals 4. And now I also need to figure out my vertices. Now, or actually we already have our A squared. So now to find B squared, I'm going to use the formula again this time. Because as soon as I have an A or a C or a C or a B, I can use that formula to find the other missing squared variable. So C squared equals A squared minus B squared. C squared is 4, A squared 16, minus the B squared, subtract the 16, negative 12 equals negative B squared, divide by negative 1, and B squared equals 12. Again, I'm not square rooting because, again, remember, you want A squared and B squared, and then your H and your K. So now that I have the 4 pieces that I need to plug in, again, remember your major axis was the x-axis. So again, this is the equation I'm using. My A squared is underneath the x minus h squared. Let me fill everything else. So now I'm going to replace. I'm replacing h with this 2. I'm going to replace k with this 0. And then I'm going to replace my A squared with the 16, and then the B squared with the 12. So let's replace all that. So x minus 2 squared over 16 plus y minus 0 squared over 12 equals 1. Again, I'm going to simplify this and just make it a y squared. And I'm done. And there's your equation in standard form. Let's try one more example. Again, this time they're giving us a major axis length. I divide it by 2. The answer what we get when we divide by 2 is the A value because this is major. So then A squared is going to be 16. Did I skip? This is the one that I had started. So here, whenever they give you either the major or the minor axis length, you're going to take that number and divide it by 2, because you got to remember half of it is to one side of the center and the other half of that number is to the other side of the center. So I'm going to take 16 divided by 2, I get 8. 8 squared is 64. Because it's a major axis that they're giving me, that's my A squared. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph these 2 focus points. And I've got a focus at 0, 0, and then I've got another one at 0, 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I need to find the center. So again, I can either add them and divide by 2, or I could count the spaces, which is the easier part. So my center is going to be at 2, 3, 4. Let's see. I need to go one more up. So I've got 4 spaces here and 4 spaces here. So my center point is at 0, 4. Now notice my C value again, that's the distance that the focus is from the center. So my C value is 4. This is my center point. So then now what I can do is my C squared, I can take this. C squared is equal to 16 because I could square that 4. And now what I can do is use C squared equals A squared minus B squared, because again, remember, we're filling in the center, the H and the K. Remember, this is H, this is K, and then A squared and B squared. So C squared is 16, A squared is 64. I'm going to subtract 64. I get negative 48 equals negative B squared. Divide by negative 1, and B squared equals 48. Again, I don't need to break it down. Now, remember, your focus points are always on your major axis. So you can see your major axis here is vertical. So you know that your A squared is going to be underneath the Y. So X minus H, and my H is 0. And then my major axis here is going to be under the Y, so the 48 goes here, that's the B squared. And then Y minus 4 squared, and it gets the 64 equals 1. Only thing I'm going to simplify is the X minus 0. So this becomes X squared over 48 plus Y minus 4 squared over 64 equals 1. Now, let's say this was a question on your test, and they ask you to come up with the equation and then also to create a graph of this given information. Now, we already have our focus points. We could also extend it out. We knew that this major axis length needed to be a total of 16, so 8 on either side. So again, just like before, we could take our center, and remember, to get to the vertices, we're going to add and subtract the A value. So my A value is 8, so I'm going to add and subtract 8. So my vertices would be at the order pair 0, and I would do 4 plus 8, and then 4 minus 8. So these are your vertices. You could do the same thing for the co-vertices. So again, take your center. This time we're going to add and subtract the B squared, or the B value. So this time, if I wanted to add and subtract, I would have to break down the 48, and then I would get 4 radical 3. So my co-vertices, I would be adding and subtracting 4 radical 3. So I would get 4 radical 3 comma 4 and negative 4 radical 3 comma 4. And those would be the co-vertices. Now, if you approximated these, I think we did this in the 10.2a notes. 4 times the square root of 3 is about 6.9. And this would be negative 6.9. So when we would go to graph these, this is where we would place the co-vertices. So if you wanted to come up here, add some more tick marks, 1, 2, 3, 4. I have a vertice here. I've got another vertice up here if I extend it. So this would be 9, 10, 11, 12. Put the other one up here. And then add in these co-vertices. Let's add some marks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So for the co-vertices, I would go to up to the 4 and almost to the 7. Same thing here. And then you could make your graph. Connect your points and make your ellipsis. Make it oval shape. So you might get a question on the test where you're actually going to have to graph on the test. So you'll be given this, you might have to write an equation. Now it could be an ellipsis, it could be a parabola. You might get a graph of a hyperbola, you never know. So we will be covering this. So this is the last example of writing equations. Your homework is 15 through 23 all. Just like I did before, I've put the even answers in there so you can check your even answers. I believe the first 4 questions or so have the center at 0, 0, and then the rest of the problems in the homework have a center that's not at the origin. So again, you're going to be writing equations in this lesson, and that's it.